Hello, everyone. Yeah, so just over a week ago, I was at OLL 2022. Get words out, brilliant. And it was fantastic. And we sold the comic and we chatted with lots of people. What was really cool is that I had a couple of people come up to me and ask about making their own comics. And I think what's interesting is that I think there's a lot of people out there who are sort of wanting to get their work out there, but there's sort of a few kind of barriers for them, and I want to address this in a way, because we have had some creative tips videos that we've done, so there will be a link at the end, so you can look over the various kind of exercises and things that we talk about. But I thought I'd do a little kind of whistle stop tour here just to kind of help you get going. So these are some basic tips, because there's a few things that you can do now that when I first started simply just weren't there, and you have got more, I would say there's more opportunities now to get your work out there and work with people than there were in like the 13 years that I've worked on this. And I would say I've learned a lot in that time, and I would say hopefully I've developed as a person in that time. So here are a few things to quickly get you on the path. Obviously, how you do this, I'm not saying that this is the one way of doing anything, because there's always different ways, but this is to get you started, and then as you get going, a bit like, say, if you're studying for a test, for example, you can find your own way and you can find the way that works for you. So anyway, let's get cracking. Right, to kick off with, let's talk about characters. Now, I would say that characters are the biggest part of what you're going to work on. Well, for a couple of reasons. One, because it's a visual medium. Now, I'm not an artist, but again, having worked on this, having sort of had experience working with artists on this, I've got a few thoughts on what you can do with characters visually, but I'm mainly going to focus on the part that I have had more experience in, which is the writing aspect. But like I say, in terms of the visuals, what you ideally want is something striking, something that kind of gets people's attention, but equally you don't want anything too complicated, because bear in mind, what looks good on a cover can take a lot more work on a sequential. And I think sometimes, I mean, I've been guilty of this, and I think everyone's been guilty of this, is that you underestimate how much work goes into sequential art. So try to sort of make, it depends on the style that you're going for, but if you want something more serious, a cartoony tone might not necessarily be right, but hey, your mileage may vary. But in terms of the character, like visually, they should sort of look, and I think the thing is, there is nothing wrong with looking at comics, video games, any number of potential influences in the particular genre that you're looking at, and to then think, what can you do that stands out whilst at the same time kind of fits these things. So we start off with that. So the next up, when we think of writing characters, so again, it depends as well. I mean, we'll get to kind of like the format and what have you a bit more, but so the kind of character that you want for a strip format is going to be different to something that's a bit more long form. So there's that you've got to think about, like how these characters suit the particular medium that you're working in, because, like you say, a simpler thing for, like say, gag comics, but I mean, even then, like say, for example, with Adventures of Lollipop, they have even though it's like an educational thing that's like 1 or 2 pages long, there are very clear characters who have very clear personality types, and little sort of running storylines, even in these kind of fairly episodic structures. So that's something to think about as well. Like, so regardless of the length of the story, the characters have to be compelling, because I think the advantage of any good character is they can like, if you have a very simple story, a good character can often override. If like a story is a bit basic, they can sort of push through it. I mean, like, for example, if you break down, say, a Wes Anderson film, like, very much like so they're not that complicated in terms of what they are, but the resonance comes from these kind of very oddball characters. And again, your mileage may vary on whether you like said characters. Now, getting to know your characters, there's a few methods that you can do this, and they don't necessarily have to start with the script. Now, I'll get to that, I think, with the next section, but exercises you can do include Q&A. So we've done Q&A videos with the characters here as just like a fun thing, but equally, you doing this yourself or your character can be insightful. So say, for example, your character's favourite type of ice cream. Now, you might think, on the surface, that's a superficial question, but here's the thing. What if I was to tell you there are two characters? One character likes a straightforward flavour, like strawberry, chocolate, vanilla. Another one wants, they put the spray cream on. They sprinkles cherry on top. When they think no one's looking, they put it in there and try and put a little bit of the cream in their mouth. I bet you're already forming a mental picture of who these two characters are based on their ice cream choices, because it might sound simple, but it can often be instructive, because, like you said, the person on this, they're both enjoying ice cream and it's lovely, but one is very much, this is what I like, this is simple, this works, thank you very much. They probably have a scoop and probably put specific amounts in the bowl. You're getting an idea of who this character is. Whereas, say, the other person, they'll probably get frustrated, sort of waiting for the ice cream to defrost and probably put it for a little bit too long in the microwave or something like that. You're getting an idea of these two characters, and then from there you can start to imagine these characters in different situations. So what would they be like in a job interview? What would they be like, if they were handcuffed together? What would they be like, if they wanted people to vote for them in the local elections? There's any number of exercises you can do to develop a character. Now, like I say, on a basic superhero level, you can talk about strengths and weaknesses, but equally, these things don't have to be literal. They can be equally someone who is very stoic and, has been through a lot, can equally be very stubborn. Someone who's very sort of peppy and energetic can be very irritating. These things, they're not necessarily as simple as strengths and weaknesses, because what one person really likes could be something that someone really hates, and it's very rare that you'll produce something and everyone will go I love that character more than I love that character. So you have to keep that in mind, and like I say, just don't be afraid to play around, don't be afraid to work with these things. I mean, another thing that I did that I found was quite helpful was you could go on YouTube and create playlists. Think about the kind of music that might sort of be the kind of music that character likes, because then you start to get an insight into that character, and then you then start to think, well, this particular song tells a particular story, and you're like, oh, how could that tie into my character? And then that'll start getting you thinking. And now we're going to get to story. So yeah, a question that I often get asked, aside from how do you make money from this, is how do you find artists? Now, the great thing is, with the advent of social media, DeviantArt, Discord, there are more and more ways that you can find artists. That's the thing, there are a lot of fantastic artists out there, and there are a lot of fantastic artists out there looking for work. Now, a common issue that I hear people have, and like I say, I had this getting started, was, well, but I don't have that much money. Again, there are ways around this. DeviantArt has a point system, and that can be good if you want an artist, and say, like I say, if you're starting off, you do it on a basic level. Now, it depends, obviously, on who you can find, whether they are comfortable working with this way, and you have to weigh this up. Ultimately, if you can, I mean, the ideal situation for all involved is that you have the money to pay page rates, and you get an artist that works at page rate. That is the ideal. It's not always possible. Like I say, in my case, budget-wise, it isn't possible. So we do a different version. Now, another great development in recent times has been crowdfunding. So you have your sort of big money ones, like say doing a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo, or there are smaller scale ones that you do on a more regular basis, like a Patreon or a Ko-fi, which are, I mean, the great thing about Ko-fi is the fact that they've added the shop feature, which I think is fantastic, because then it gives you an area where you can sell things, and it's quick to update, which I think is tremendous. Now, what you've got to bear in mind is, you can say like, oh, you know, I can't afford X, Y, Z. What can't you afford? Now, say for example, you want to do a massive, well, I say like we do a 40-page graphic novel. Another option is to do, like I say, a proof of concept short story and try and get someone in on that level. I mean, what we often do is, like I say, work on a share basis. So, however many sales we get in, shares from, like I say, from social media and whatever, and then we share that out with artists, and people have agreed to that. And like I say, it's about finding someone, one, who is comfortable with that, and two, understands the commitment that you're asking them to do. Now, we had to change things up recently because, like I said, I got some fantastic feedback from Susie Gander about kind of making this a bit fairer. So the next one we've got like a main 20-page story and then a shorter backup story, and then, like I say, some additional material on top of that, which is still going to be 40 pages, but like I say, it's less for an artist to take on, and I think that's fairer, because like I say, we want people to, you know, to want to be part of this and want to sort of do it in a way where it's not, you know, you don't want people to get stressed out. Or like, in all honesty, it's unlikely that you'll be able to do this as, like, say, a main source of income. So, realistically, it might get to the point where this massively explodes, and I hope it does. But you do have to prepare for that, and you have to consider what you have to do. And also, as well, the crucial thing is, I would say, keep it simple. So with each title you work on, when I first started doing this, a big mistake I made was trying to get, like, different people with different elements. So someone working on pencils, someone working on inks, and they were all in like different places, and coordination was hard. And then to top it off, I decided to try and do several issues at once. I don't recommend that. I really don't. Maybe you're someone who'd be better coordinated than me. If so, awesome. I recommend keeping it simple, like work with a person. Another thing that I've changed with the comic, because this is something I've noticed, and I'm not having a go at anyone, because reality, everyone wants to do covers, everyone wants to do promotional stuff, and I get it, because it gets you out there, it's less work, and, you know, it's what everyone wants. You know, everyone wants to see. People say, like, don't judge a book by its cover. Well, this is comics, it's going to happen. And a great cover is fantastic, I'm not having a go. But I want people to work on the sequentials. So what I've decided is that if you want to work on the sequentials, then you get to do the cover. And I've put that in as a rule because I think that's the only fair way of doing it. And like I say, what I've been lucky with is people coming on board, people who know what we do. I mean, a lot of the time what I've done is Fan Art Friday, I think, has been quite useful in that we have found artists through that. We have had people get to know the comic and then come on board, which is wonderful. And it's great. I mean, like I said, with this upcoming issue, we've got a couple of people who know the comic who are coming on board for the first time for a main comic, which is amazing. I'm so chuffed with that, and I'm hoping we can do that more for the last ones coming up. But yeah, I think the thing is try and... It's hard because you want to balance these things. You want a schedule where stuff gets done, because then you get people sort of asking, oh, when's the next issue coming out? Oh, what's going on? But you also don't, like I say, you don't want us to get stressed out either. So it helps to have a target. So in our case, in September, we have the Norcon convention, which I'm really looking forward to. And then, you know, you can launch it, and it's a thing to target. But yeah, like I say, your mileage may vary, but this is what I recommend. And, you know, like I say, keep in contact with each other. I mean, as a creator, be as reasonable as you can. like, obviously you've got to follow up with people, but don't bug them. It's very important that you balance it out reasonably. So, for example, I do like a monthly schedule thing, and I think that works quite well as well, keeping up to date with people without kind of getting too much in their faces. But, you know, like I say, try and balance it out. Equally, as artists, you can make your, you know, life easier by doing these things without people asking them, and then you're much less likely to get bugged. I'm just going to throw that out there. Communication is important, you know, as a team, you know, if it's a team effort. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're someone who can write and produce the art for yourself, fantastic. However, I do still suggest, and this is going to be the next stage, feedback. Feedback is important, we will say. Yeah, so feedback. Now, this is important regardless of whether you have a team or you're doing this for yourself. Once you've, I spoke before about the first draft. Now, the first draft, like I say, go wild, have fun, get it down. Now, if you're someone who wants to sort of work on this yourself before getting someone on board, put it away for a couple of days. I don't know, go out for a walk, you know, have a drink, watch a film, whatever, you know, catch up on video games, whatever. Give yourself that little mini break, and then come back to it, because then you're more likely to be able to, like, look over it in a more kind of objective way. But what is better is if you can find people to give you feedback. Now, the balance with feedback is you want people who understand what you're trying to do, who are reasonably, like, close, like, so for example, someone who, like, if you know someone who is an artist, if you know someone who likes comics, if you know someone who is particularly passionate about the kind of story you want to tell, these are the ideal people to seek for feedback. Because you don't want people who are afraid to sort of be, like, who want to, like, mainly just say positive things, just to be encouraging, which is lovely, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're trying to get, like, their thoughts on what you can do to make it better. Equally, there are some people who mistake that for being relentlessly negative, and there are certain things that are unhelpful. So saying such and such is a rip-off of X, Y, or Z, shut up, the thing that you're saying is a rip-off of something, is probably inspired by something else, not helpful. Don't say that, doesn't help. Yeah, so something like that, something, you know, very, if you talk in sort of very basic terms, if you're sort of brutal for the sake of it, you're not really helping. Like, if you're someone giving feedback, be wary of your tone. Like I say, because yes, you're trying to help people, but you are not Gordon Ramsay. You are not, you know, don't do that. Please don't do that. When you give feedback, look at what someone's doing, try and think about what they're trying to do and say, I see you're doing this, this and this, have you thought about ... Couch it in the terms of you are trying to make their thing better. It's not about the story in your head, it's about what you think they're trying to do. What's the tone they're going for? What's the story that they're looking to do? Because then you get feedback that will help them and will drive this thing forward. And like I say, likewise, if you as the person making this take it on board, and remember, you do not necessarily have to do things just because someone gives you feedback. Like, if the feedback doesn't work for what you want to do, so, oh, you know, you should put in more local references. Well, I don't want to, so I'm not. Or, you know, and like I say, even in some cases I've had from people I massively respect, but I personally, like, even though I could see where they were coming from, I didn't agree with the approach they were making from it. And that's fine, you know, because I still massively respect their opinion, and I see where they're coming from, but I didn't personally agree, and that's fine. That's fine too. But again, you know, be polite. You know, thank people. And like I said, if you're someone who gives the feedback and they don't take the feedback, don't take it personally. Like I say, unless, like I say, they are belligerent about it. You know, you're trying to make this as good as possible, and to be reasonably true to it. The other thing with feedback, I would say, is don't ask too many people. Because the danger of asking too many people is that you will get very wildly different opinions, and it's very hard then to make something that's going to sort of, address these issues and at the same time be true to what you want to do. So keep that in mind. Let's see. So, last up, we have got a couple of questions, so I'm going to cover them. Alrighty then, so I went online and asked people if they had any questions about working on a comic, and I got one from the absolutely excellent artist David Fleming, and he asked about maintaining motivation. And this is a very good question, and one I have very personal experience with. And maintaining motivation can be hard, especially, like I say, if you've worked on something for a long time. There will inevitably be points where you question whether this is worth it, whether you'll get what you want from it. Like I say, you have a period of sort of trying to think, is this going to work or not? Now, in this situation, what you have to think about is what you're doing this for, what your goals are. And I think, for me personally, the best way to maintain motivation is to keep going. But if you're feeling that something isn't working, look at whether or not you can correct that. So say, for example, like you see people like talk about having an art block. Well, one way of correcting an art block is to change up what you do. So say, for example, you only do art at home, try going to a cafe or a library. If you're someone who mainly does art in the night, try and do it in the daytime. Mixing it up can help kind of rejuvenate sort of creative juices in a way. I would say a lot of the creative exercises I mentioned earlier, doing them in the middle of something that you're working on can help as well. Also, don't be afraid to take breaks. If you need a break, take a break. Like, as I say, I think one way of doing this, like one thing that I like to do, is to schedule them in. So, for example, I like to go out in the morning, go for a walk, get a coffee and a paper somewhere, and I find that kind of chills me out before I start doing any work. Now, as I say, people can be different, and it's, like I say, it is like studying. I think everyone's got their method that works for them, and there is nothing wrong with finding a way. So, for example, if you only do, like, say, half an hour in a day, that's still half an hour's worth of work. And I see some people like get very sort of hung up on things like, say, word counts or pages and things. And if that helps you, brilliant. I have never found that. I personally write until I want to stop. And then, I kind of listen to my body. So, like, say, you break for lunch, you break for dinner, you want to watch The Simpsons. Like, for me, that's what works for me. Now, what you do might be completely different to what I do, and that's okay. But I think it's a good way of maintaining motivation. And like I say, what we recently found, like when things stopped working, is that, we had a look, we got some feedback from people, we did like a survey, and this is what resulted in the reboot of the comic. And it meant sort of doing the story in a way that I originally wanted to, and doing, sort of changing things up in a different way. And this is the thing, always look at what you're doing, always think about how you do it, because then, like I say, you decide if you want to carry on. Because it might be that you get to a point where it isn't working for you at all and you're not enjoying it anymore, or it just doesn't work for you. If you want to stop then, that is totally fair enough. There is no shame in it. Because, like I said, I've had this with various projects that I've worked on, and it's not time wasted. You learn from it. And sometimes these ideas will be composted and kind of come back in different forms when you work on something else. So don't beat yourself up if something doesn't come off. It's all experience. And there's, the equivalent of like kind of grinding during a video game. Like, you're still building it up even if you're not sort of hitting the main goals. So try and think of it that way. I mean, that might be a bit patronising, but it was the first analogy that came in my head. Okay, and let's see, he's got another question here. So again, course corrective story isn't working. Well, we kind of touched on that. Now, what you want to think about here is, because again, it depends on the form. So some people, like I say, you will have these strips. I mean, I think the good thing with, like, say, a strip thing is that, you know, you can make changes and it can just feel natural over the course of something that's ongoing. But I think with a long form one, it is a bit trickier. But equally, as I say, there is nothing wrong with rebooting. There is nothing wrong with doing things in a different way. The only thing I would caution against is sort of going down that kind of George Lucas route of always kind of wanting to change things and, you know, sort of continually fix things in the past, because the problem is then you never move forward. And I think for me personally, the course correct should make sense. It should be something that you can then kind of adjust. Like I say, the great thing, as I say, in the early stages of planning a story is that, you know, once you've got the first draft down, you can then look at it and then decide that you want to change things, and that's fine. When you're in the middle of something, it's harder, but it's still doable. And I think you just have to kind of work out the way that, like I say, if you can think about it from the perspective of someone who's looking at this, like I say, if you were watching a film or something, and then the retcon happens, but the retcon makes sense, then that's okay. I think that's what you have to think about. You have to think about it from the perspective of someone who's going to read this without second guessing yourself too much. And as with everything in life, that's a tricky balance. Okay, so that's it. That's this particular video. So hopefully by the end of this you've got some idea of how you want to put characters together, how you want to put a story together, getting a team together. You know, there's a lot that we've gone over. I mean, promotion, I think, is another thing we could probably talk about. Like, if we did this as a part 2, because the actual putting together, I think, takes a lot of work. But like the promotion and getting something out there, there's various things that you can do that we can talk about there. But like I say, throwing out an example, we do trailers, we do Q&As, getting flyers out in indie cafes, local media. Like, don't fully rely on online. There's so many events and things that you could do that you get yourself out there. You know, don't be afraid. Do a little research, see what's available in your local area, because what's available to you is potentially different to me. But there's a lot out there. But yeah, if you've got any further questions, if you want to know more about anything specific related to story, characters, team, promotion, whatever, let me know, because like I said, I'll be happy to do a part 2. Anyway, much love.